We're going to spend a few minutes looking at a song Blues for Alice by the saxophonist Charlie Parker. Charlie Parker's nickname was Bird, and the chords here, the pattern of them became so famous that sometimes people just call it bird blues or bird changes after the way that the chords change. So here's a very slow, very bad version of the bird changes. At least that's the first part of it. So you can hear there's a lot going on. There's a lot of different types of chords that are all being played. But the song is called Blues for Alice, and the form is called the Bird Blues or Bird Changes. And it's based on a different musical form, the 12-bar blues. And so I'm going to play you that whole thing, and you're going to hear, one, that it's probably familiar, and two, that there's a lot less going on. So it sounds like this. So that's the basic blues form, and there isn't too much happening. And that's actually one of the reasons why it has been such a great canvas for all sorts of artistic expression. So in understanding a way to get into bebop, an entry point can be looking musically what's being added and what's being taken away from the pre-existing music. And we talked about 5/1s and 2/5/1s and tritone substitutions and just putting different chords in general. And this is kind of a great example. The Bird Blues is a cool way that a whole bunch of chords were added to a form that existed previously to make a new form and a new structure for bebop that people in the know understood and played against, and people who didn't had a hard time. And again, this has a lot to do with the construction of in-groups and out-groups, not players versus listeners, but players versus other players. So let's take a look at just the first part of the blues and how it works. Just that much. So one of the reasons why that's a nice landing point from here is that there actually is a 5/1 relationship. If we play this up here, we have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this is not really about the history of how Charlie Parker and others developed this, more just explaining a way to think about it, which could help, is we don't need that long to set up the second chord. We don't need to spend all that time on that one chord to prepare you to hear this chord. In fact, you probably just need that much. So if we take all that space we were spending on that chord initially, and we just say the only part we absolutely need is that much, then what can we do with the rest of it? And one of the things we could do is keep that 5/1 relationship happening. So we could set this chord up with its own 5. And we could set this one up with its own 5. And so on and so forth until we do a whole bunch of these. And if we start here and go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, we can create a whole chain of these before we finally go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like a slinky going down a staircase, we can have this descending, really settled feeling by the time we hit that. So that's basically the way that the bird changes work in Blues for Alice. Some of those chords are changed so that they become 2 5s rather than just a string of 5s. And the difference here is not important at all. What is important is that we start with our basic home chord for 4 beats rather. And then jump up to this note and just go down by fives. So until we get to that second chord. Now, the rest of the form has lots more chords, but they actually follow basically the same logic. So in its own way, the Bird Blues are a 12-bar blues. If you try to do it simultaneously, again, slowly, not very well, it kind of sounds like this. Do they sound great played simultaneously? Not really. But the important thing is they start in the same place and they end in the same place. And the middle part is a created structure that people in the know could use to improvise on. And if you were new to bebop and you weren't in the know about how Bird Blues was constructed, you wouldn't necessarily have a sense of where to go with this. It's also able to be mapped backwards onto a more traditional blues. If you're playing with a band and they're just doing the basic wide open blues, there's nothing to prevent you as a soloist from playing notes that suggest all of these bird changes. So that's the Bird Blues, how it relates to the regular blues. And now you have an example of chord substitutions and some of the changes bebop made in adding to the music.